Unions continue to express outrage over Telkom's decision to begin retrenchment talks. The Telecom's company announced this week that it will be cutting 3,000 jobs. The Communication Workers Union says it wants a sit-down with Telkom. So for more on this, I'm joined by Communication Workers Union General Secretary Aubrey Shabalala. Aubrey, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Faith, and viewers.
Well, you're speaking about how you're angered at, Telkom's decision there on the retrenchment notice. Tell us a little bit about, did you receive any form of insight into the fact that they were going to be taking this decision in the first place?
Well, it's been an ongoing problem. In fact, when we received the letter, we tried to trace the trend that has been happening since the landing of Sipho Maseko and Jabu Mabuz and Telkom. If you look at the reasons that they are giving today, it's the same reasons they gave in 2016, that they want to cut the staff so that Telkom could be viable.
And I think it was about 2,000 jobs that were cut in
2,000 jobs plus 6,000 outsourced. Yes. And if you trace it back, they paid themselves handsomely because they create what we call an artificial profit. Because they cut workers now and leave some of the money, and at the end of the financial year they have those dividends, they have bonuses and all the incentives that they include.
About 153 million rand, if I'm not incorrect, that were raised between the year 2018 as a result of that.
And this time around in 2019 they had about 105 million rands to a few group of executives where Sipho Maseko himself pocketed about 23 million rands and take 3,000 workers out of the jobs. And this is what has been going on and on. That's why we are now calling for government to intervene, because the government is a major shareholder. And if it's a major shareholder, you cannot take such decision without a board meeting. And a board meeting, a government as a major shareholder has to be there to form a quorum to take such a decision. So we are wondering whether the government was part of this decision to shed off jobs, because they are enjoying dividends coming from Telkom and they are not worried about the wealth of the growth of economy of this country and the employment of our people. If they were not a part of it, of course the decision becomes it should be reversible, because it's not a legal decision. So we are caught in between that. Hence we are calling for that meeting for intervention.
Do you think that Telkom executives are trying to add on to their pockets or fill their pockets at the expenses of employees? In other words, the best way to make good money and make it very quickly is to get rid of the employees who may be taking a salary and pay ourselves at the end of the year.
Not only at the expense of workers themselves, but at the expense of the country as well, because Telkom should have been in the forefront of rolling out the optic fiber into the township, into the rural areas, to allow our people to have access to a cheaper network. That's the first point, so that we don't find ourselves been fighting over the data must fall and so on. That's the first point. The second point, it capacitates the state in terms of the infrastructure. Telkom is not doing that. What has Telkom been doing under Sipho Maseko has been selling the infrastructure, cutting the property, cutting workers, creating artificial profit for themselves to benefit, and they've been doing that very well, and they've been benefiting. And this is a fight that we all have to stand against, because it's at the expense of the country itself in general, not only workers.
Do you want Sipho out?
Sipho must definitely go together with the board, because if we keep on such people, these are recycled leaders, including Jabu Mabuz. You could see that the man has no idea when he was thrown to ESCOM. He created a mess. He created a mess in what we call Telkom for some time, and he escaped with it. But this is time for that we must call for Sipho must go, including his executive ER, Mr. Alfingubu. He's a retired personnel who came to Telkom just to continue with this onslaught and also to milk the SOEs.
Well, if we're saying that it's all about the regurgitation of leaders in executive positions, in other words, you want to jump from Telkom to ESCOM, the other one will jump from Transnet to ESCOM. If it's such a regurgitation, who is the one that is initiating it? Is it not government?
That's why we are calling them, because you should not be wishy-washy about this thing. We said that even our members has to camp outside the Tuli House. Let it be, because this is now the fight against poverty and to sustain your life. Because when you are thrown into unemployment at this point in time, where you have more than 10 million workers unemployed in South Africa, mass market is retrenching. We just had the graduate from university who will be looking for employment. We just have school leavers who have passed matric who might be seeking for employment. It's a massive, so you'll be left with two options. It's either you go to be into criminal activities or starve to death. So workers must stand up and defend themselves and fight against the
But Aubrey, I'm going to ask you this. What if now Telkom comes back and says, but guys, we've stated the reasons why we actually have an intention to retrench. And I'm going to read you one of those reasons. It's macroeconomic conditions, it's uncertainty in regulation, and also a very competitive environment. Those are just some of the reasons that have been stipulated that we need to shed these amounts of jobs simply because we don't have the capacity to take on 3,000 people. Do you buy these excuses, or should I say these reasons for it?
That's a good reason to get rid of all of them. Because if you Google back, these are the same reason they gave 3-4 years ago. So it means that they've done nothing. Absolutely, there's no innovation, there's no new ideas with that executive. So they gave us the executive, but we can give them solutions. We are saying that if you go into a space of a new customer, the townships have no optic fiber, nothing. It's a massive base of a customer. They still want to contest where there's a oversaturated of a competition, including of Vodacom and MTN. But let's not forget that these weak decisions that are so lousy, they've sold Vodacom, they themselves, in 2007. They fought against us, and that led to them 2 years later creating something called Later, which was a failed project. So these are the challenges that we are facing. And in 2016, they also created something called Future Makers, where they said those who are retrenched are going to get the cooperative so that they can start to work for themselves. What did it happen? After 18 months or so, Telkom stopped giving them jobs for foreign investment. We started taking over those jobs. The bid vets started to taking over those jobs. Our people were languished there in the township, poor. So this is something that we must stand up, rise against it, and fight against it.
Aubrey, we're going to leave it there for this afternoon, but thanks a lot for joining us and shedding some light in terms of what your thoughts and thinking process is with regards to Telkom there. Aubrey Shabalala giving us the latest on